The homeless group wasn't what they seemed. They were hiding something massive. As Maya studied their faces in the dim light, she realized they weren't victims. They were vigilantes tracking the same corrupt network her father controlled. Now she faced an impossible choice: expose her father's crimes and risk everything, or become complicit in his evil empire. But what if this ragtag group held the key to bringing down the most dangerous man she'd ever known? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya's training kicked in as she assessed the situation. The woman who'd guided her inside, Eleanor, she'd introduced herself, moved with surprising grace for someone supposedly living on the streets. Her weathered hands were too clean, her posture too confident. The man behind her, Marcus, scanned the perimeter like military personnel, not someone broken by circumstance. "Sit." Eleanor gestured toward a surprisingly sturdy chair. The cabin's interior was a study in contradictions. The walls appeared rotted from outside, but inside revealed reinforced beams and modern electrical work hidden beneath calculated decay. Solar panels disguised as broken roof tiles powered LED strips that mimicked candlelight. Maya remained standing. "Who are you really?" Marcus chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "Smart girl. Your father said you were trouble." "You know my father?" Maya's stomach dropped. Had this been another elaborate manipulation? "Thomas Blackwood." Eleanor spat the name like poison. "We've been tracking his operation for 3 years. Money laundering, human trafficking, political corruption. Your father's empire reaches further than most people imagine." "Why should I trust you?" Maya asked, though part of her already knew the answer. The photographs on the wall weren't random missing persons. They were her father's victims. Eleanor approached the evidence wall, pointing to specific images. Sarah Chen, 16, disappeared after her family refused to sell their restaurant to your father's development company. Miguel Santos, 22, went missing after witnessing a payoff between your father and Senator Williams. The medical equipment? Maya gestured toward the back room. "Sometimes we find them alive," Marcus said quietly. "Not often, but sometimes." Maya understood now. Her father hadn't dumped her with random homeless people as punishment. He'd delivered her directly to his enemies, either through monumental stupidity or calculated cruelty. Knowing Thomas Blackwood, it was probably both. "He wanted you gone," Eleanor confirmed Maya's thoughts. "You've been asking too many questions, accessing files you shouldn't see. Your father doesn't tolerate loose ends." "But he miscalculated," Maya said, pieces falling into place. "He doesn't know how much I've already gathered." Eleanor and Marcus exchanged glances. "What kind of information?" Maya hesitated. Once she revealed her hand, there would be no going back. Her father's reach extended into law enforcement, politics, and business. These vigilantes might be her only allies, but trusting anyone felt like stepping off a cliff. Financial records, communication logs, enough to connect him to at least 12 major crimes over the past 5 years. Maya's voice grew stronger with each word. "I've been documenting everything." Marcus stepped forward. "You're not the first of Blackwood's children to reach out to us." Maya's blood froze. "Children?" "Your half-sister, Rebecca. She contacted us 6 months ago through encrypted channels, said she had information that could bring down your father's entire operation." Eleanor's expression darkened. "We never heard from her again." The name hit Maya like a sledgehammer. Rebecca had disappeared suddenly, her boarding school claiming she'd transferred. Their father had dismissed questions with casual indifference, but Maya had suspected something darker. "She's dead, isn't she?" "We don't know. But her disappearance follows your father's pattern. Anyone who threatens his empire simply vanishes." Maya realized she was standing at the same crossroads that had claimed Rebecca. The difference was that she'd found these people first, or they'd found her. Either way, she wasn't facing this alone. "What do you need me to do?" Her backpack felt heavier now, loaded with the few belongings her father had thrown together: some clothes, a water bottle, and the $20 he'd shoved at her with a sneer. Learn what the real world is like, he'd said. Maybe then you'll appreciate what you have. What she had was a father who drank too much, and a stepmother who pretended Maya didn't exist. What she had was a house that never felt like home, and a family that treated her like an unwelcome guest. Maybe being abandoned wasn't the worst thing that could happen to her. "You okay, honey?" The woman's voice was gentler than Maya expected. "I'm Sarah. We saw what happened." Behind Sarah stood a man in his 40s with kind eyes and calloused hands, and a younger guy who couldn't be much older than Maya herself. They all had that weathered look of people who spent their lives outdoors, but there was something else in their expressions, a wariness that went deeper than simple caution. "I'm fine," Maya lied, adjusting her backpack straps. "Just figuring out my next move." The older man stepped forward. "Name's Jack. This is Tommy." He nodded toward the younger guy. "Look, it's getting dark, and these roads aren't safe at night. You got somewhere to go?" Maya almost laughed at the question. If she had somewhere to go, she wouldn't be standing here. Not really. Sarah and Jack exchanged a look that Maya couldn't quite read. There was something passing between them, a silent conversation that seemed to involve more than simple concern for a stranded teenager. "There's a place," Sarah said slowly, "where you could stay tonight. It's not much, but it's warm and dry." "We don't usually," Jack started, then stopped himself. "What Sarah means is, we're pretty private people, but nobody should be alone out here after dark." Tommy nodded toward the woods. "It's not far, just through those trees." Maya hesitated. Everything her father had ever told her about strangers and dangerous situations flashed through her mind. But then she thought about the alternative, walking down this empty road in the dark, hoping to find a gas station or diner that might let her use their phone. And even if she did, who would she call? "Okay," she said. "Thank you." They walked single file along a narrow path that wound deeper into the forest. Maya noticed how quietly they moved, how Tommy kept glancing back the way they did come, how Sarah's hand never strayed far from a large knife on her belt. These weren't ordinary homeless people, she realized. There was something almost military about their awareness, their coordination. The cabin appeared suddenly in a small clearing, its dark windows reflecting the last rays of sunlight filtering through the canopy. It looked abandoned from the outside, peeling paint, sagging porch, weeds growing up through the floorboards, but Maya caught the faint glow of light seeping through cracks in the boarded-up windows. "Home sweet home," Tommy said with a bitter smile. Jack fumbled with what looked like several different locks on the front door. "Sorry about all the security," he muttered. "Can't be too careful these days." As the door swung open, Maya caught her first glimpse of the interior. Whatever she'd expected, it wasn't this. The inside of the cabin was nothing like the exterior suggested. Clean sleeping bags were arranged around a small camping stove. Battery-powered lanterns provided warm light. A table in the corner was covered with maps, papers, and what looked like surveillance equipment. Sarah noticed her staring. "You hungry? We've got some soup heating up." "Who is that?" Maya asked, nodding toward the wall of photographs. The three of them went very still. Jack's hand moved toward something Maya couldn't see. Tommy stepped slightly to the side, blocking her view of the door. "That," Sarah said carefully, "is why we can't just let you walk away now." The cabin's interior was darker than Maya had expected, the boarded windows allowing only slivers of daylight to penetrate the gloom. As her eyes adjusted, she could make out the shapes of makeshift furniture. Milk crates stacked into shelves, a torn couch that had seen better decades, and sleeping bags rolled against the walls like colorful logs. "Welcome to the Ritz," Ghost said with bitter humor, dropping his pack near the door. "Five-star accommodations, as you can see." Sage was already moving through the space with practiced efficiency, lighting candles that had been strategically placed around the room. The flickering flames revealed more details, empty food cans cleaned and repurposed as containers, a camping stove on a wooden crate, and clothes hanging from a makeshift line strung between two support beams. "How long have you been living here?" Maya asked, trying to keep the judgment out of her voice. 3 months, give or take, Echo replied, settling onto the couch with a wince. Maya noticed he favored his left leg when he walked. Found it after the old factory shut down. Nobody comes out this way anymore. Maya set her backpack down carefully, hyper-aware that everything she owned was now contained in that single bag. The reality of her situation was beginning to sink in. This wasn't just a punishment or a lesson her father was teaching her. He really had left her here with these strangers in this forgotten place. "You hungry?" Sage asked, rummaging through a collection of canned goods. "We've got, let's see, more beans, some soup that's probably still good, and crackers." "I'm okay," Maya lied, though her stomach had been growling for hours. She didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to take food from people who clearly had little to spare. Ghost snorted. "You're not okay. None of us are okay. That's why we're here." He grabbed a can opener from a wooden crate. "Besides, we share everything here. That's the rule." "What are the other rules?" Maya asked. The three exchanged glances, and Maya caught something unspoken passing between them. It was Echo who finally answered. "No real names unless someone offers theirs freely. No questions about the past unless someone wants to share. Everyone contributes what they can. Everyone watches everyone's back." He paused, studying Maya's face in the candlelight. "And nobody goes into the back room without permission from all three of us." Maya's eyes drifted toward the rear of the cabin, where she could just make out the shape of a door in the shadows. "What's in the back room?" "See, that's the kind of question that breaks rule number 2, Ghost said. But his tone wasn't harsh. "Some things require trust, kid, and trust takes time." Sage handed Maya an open can of soup and a spoon. "Eat," she said gently. "You look like you haven't had a real meal in days." Maya accepted the food gratefully, realizing that Sage was right. The soup was cold but surprisingly good, and as she ate, she found herself studying her new companions. Ghost, despite his gruff exterior, had made sure she got fed. Sage moved with a maternal efficiency that suggested she'd been taking care of people for a long time, and Echo watched everything with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see more than he let on. "So, what's your story?" Echo asked. "Dad finally get tired of you cramping his style?" Maya nearly choked on her soup. "How did you—" "Lucky guess. Plus, you've got that abandoned rich kid vibe going on. The clothes, the backpack, the way you're trying not to look disgusted by our living situation." Echo's voice wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. "We've all got our stories, Maya. Yours is just fresher than most." The use of her real name surprised her. She'd been ready to pick something else, something that would help her blend in with these people who wore their chosen identities like armor. "He said I was ungrateful," Maya found herself saying. "Said I needed to learn what the real world was like." "And what do you think?" Sage asked quietly. "Is this the real world?" Maya looked around the cabin again, seeing it with different eyes now. Yes, it was rough and makeshift and far from the comfortable life she'd known. But there was something else here too, a sense of community, of people who'd found each other and chosen to stick together despite everything. "I think," Maya said slowly, "that I'm starting to understand there are a lot of different real worlds." Ghost actually smiled at that, the expression transforming his entire face. "Kid might be all right," he said to the others. As the afternoon faded into evening, Maya helped them prepare a communal dinner from their pooled resources. The conversation flowed easier now, though always staying carefully in the present tense. But throughout it all, Maya found her eyes drawn back to that closed door and the secret that lay behind it. The morning light filtered through the grimy windows, casting long shadows across the cabin's main room. Maya had barely slept, her mind churning with questions about what she'd witnessed the night before. The hushed conversation, the wooden box, Marcus's stern warning, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't solve. She found herself alone in the cabin. The others had disappeared before dawn, leaving only a few cold embers in the fireplace and the lingering scent of instant coffee. Maya wrapped the thin blanket around her shoulders and stepped outside, searching for any sign of where they'd gone. Behind the cabin, a narrow path wound through dense undergrowth. Fresh footprints in the damp earth suggested this was the route they'd taken. Against her better judgment, Maya followed the trail deeper into the woods. "You shouldn't be here." Maya spun around to find Elena emerging from behind a cluster of tomato plants, her expression unreadable. The older woman's hands were dirty from gardening, but her movements were precise and purposeful. "I was just looking for everyone," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I didn't know where you'd gone." Elena studied her for a long moment, then continued pulling weeds with methodical efficiency. "Marcus won't like that you found this place." "Why? It's just a garden." "Is it?" Elena's tone suggested Maya was missing something obvious. "Look closer." Maya examined the garden more carefully. Hidden among the vegetables were plants she didn't recognize, some with unusual leaf patterns, others bearing strange fruits. In one corner, protected by a makeshift greenhouse, grew specimens that looked almost medicinal in nature. "What are these?" Maya asked, pointing to a cluster of plants with distinctive purple flowers. "Insurance," Elena replied cryptically. "The kind that keeps us alive out here." Before Maya could ask what she meant, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both freeze. Marcus appeared through the trees, his face darkening when he saw Maya in the clearing. "I told you to stay at the cabin," he said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. She was curious. Elena intervened, just like any kid would be. Xavi and Liam emerged behind Marcus, both looking uncomfortable with the tension. Maya noticed they were carrying backpacks that seemed heavier than when she'd first met them. "We need to talk," Marcus continued, gesturing for Maya to follow him back toward the cabin. "All of us." The walk back was silent, but Maya could feel the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. Whatever secret they were protecting, her discovery of the garden had forced their hand. Inside the cabin, Marcus pulled out a detailed map and spread it across the wooden table. Red X's marked various locations throughout the surrounding area, connected by a network of penciled lines. "Your father didn't just abandon you randomly," Marcus began, his tone more serious than she'd ever heard it. "He left you specifically with us in this exact location." Maya's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "We've been watching him for months," Liam said quietly. "He's involved in something much bigger than you realize." Elena moved to the wooden box Maya had seen the night before and carefully opened it. Inside, nestled in foam padding, were dozens of small glass vials filled with clear liquid. Each vial was labeled with dates and coordinates that corresponded to the marks on Marcus's map. "Your father works for a pharmaceutical company that's been conducting illegal experiments," Elena explained. "These samples contain evidence of what they've been doing, testing chemicals on homeless populations, on people no one would miss." Maya's legs felt weak. She sank into a chair, trying to process what she was hearing. "That's impossible. My father works in accounting." "That's his cover," Marcus said grimly. "He's actually a liaison between the company and the test sites. We've been collecting evidence for months, trying to build a case that will stick." Javi leaned forward, his expression sympathetic. "The night your father brought you here, he wasn't punishing you. He was delivering you." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. "Delivering me for what?" "You're the perfect test subject," Elena said softly. "Young, healthy, and according to official records, you'll be listed as another runaway who disappeared into the system." Maya's world tilted on its axis. Everything she thought she knew about her father, about her situation, about these people who'd taken her in, it was all a lie built on top of another lie. "But we're not going to let that happen," Marcus said firmly. "That's why we're really here." The morning light filtered through the grimy windows, casting long shadows across the cabin's interior. Maya had barely slept, her mind racing with fragments of overheard conversations and the weight of unspoken secrets that seemed to permeate every corner of this place. She'd heard footsteps throughout the night, soft, deliberate movements that suggested her new companions were far from restful sleepers. Raven was already awake, sitting cross-legged near the window with a battered notebook in her lap. Her fingers moved quickly across the pages, writing something with an intensity that made Maya curious despite herself. The older girl's guard seemed slightly lowered in the early morning quiet, revealing glimpses of someone far more complex than the tough street persona she projected. "You're up early," Raven said without looking up from her writing. Maya stretched, wincing as her muscles protested against the unforgiving floor. "Hard to sleep when you don't know if you're safe. Safety's a luxury none of us can afford." Raven finally glanced up, her dark eyes studying Maya with uncomfortable precision. "The sooner you accept that, the better your chances of surviving whatever brought you here." The casual mention of survival sent a chill through Maya. Yesterday, her biggest concern had been her father's latest cruel punishment. Now she was questioning everything: where she was, who these people really were, and why a simple abandoned cabin felt like it was hiding something dangerous. Finn emerged from the back room, his usually cheerful demeanor replaced by something more serious. He moved with purpose, checking the windows and listening at the door before acknowledging the two girls. His behavior triggered an alarm in Maya's mind. This wasn't the casual vigilance of homeless people protecting their shelter. This was something else entirely. "We need to talk," Finn said, his voice low. "All of us." Sage appeared as if summoned, her timing too perfect to be coincidental. Maya realized they'd been waiting for her to wake up, planning this conversation. The thought that she'd been discussed while unconscious made her skin crawl. "Maya," Sage began, settling onto a makeshift chair constructed from stacked crates. "We've been thinking about your situation." "My situation?" Maya kept her voice steady despite the anxiety building in her chest. "You mean being dumped here by my father?" Among other things, Sage's weathered face revealed nothing. "You see, this place isn't just a random shelter. We're here for specific reasons, and your arrival, well, it complicates things." Raven closed her notebook with a sharp snap. "What Sage is trying to say is that we're not exactly homeless by accident." The admission hung in the air like smoke, toxic and inescapable. Maya felt her breathing shallow as pieces of yesterday's observations began forming a disturbing picture: the careful way they'd watched the road, the organized efficiency of their living space, the tension that had nothing to do with typical survival concerns. "What are you running from?" Maya asked, surprised by her own directness. Finn laughed, but the sound held no humor. "Wrong question. You should be asking what we're running toward, or what's running toward us," Raven added darkly. Sage shot them both warning looks. "What they're saying is that our presence here isn't permanent. We're waiting for something." Maya's heart pounded as she processed this information. Every instinct screamed that she was in deeper trouble than she'd imagined. These weren't just strangers offering temporary shelter. They were people involved in something that required hiding, planning, and apparently waiting for some predetermined event. "I should go," Maya said, standing quickly. "I don't want any part of whatever this is." "Part of what?" Maya's voice cracked. Raven stood, moving to block the door with casual efficiency. "Your father didn't abandon you here randomly, Maya. Think about it. Of all the places in the world he could have left you, he chose this specific location. That's not coincidence." The words hit Maya like physical blows. Her father's strange behavior the past few weeks. His insistence on driving her himself instead of simply kicking her out. The specific directions he'd seemed to know without consulting a map. The satisfied smile on his face as he'd driven away. "You're saying he knew you were here?" Maya whispered. "We're saying," Sage replied carefully, "that your arrival was expected. What we need to determine now is whether you're here as an ally or as bait." The cabin suddenly felt impossibly small, the walls closing in as Maya realized she wasn't just caught between her father's cruelty and these strangers' secrets. She was apparently a planned component in something much larger and more dangerous than she could have imagined. Outside, a car engine rumbled in the distance, growing closer. The morning light filtered through the grimy windows, casting long shadows across the cabin floor where Maya had spent a restless night. Every creak of the old wood had jolted her awake, her mind replaying fragments of the whispered conversation she'd overheard. The words disposed of and evidence echoed in her head like a broken record. She stretched her aching muscles, trying to appear casual as the others began stirring around her. Dutch was already up, methodically folding his blanket with military precision. His movements were sharp, deliberate, nothing like the gentle giant persona he'd shown her yesterday. "Sleep well?" Needle asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Those pale eyes seemed to see right through Maya's forced smile. "Fine, thanks." Maya's voice came out hoarser than intended. She cleared her throat, studying each face for any sign of deception. In the harsh morning light, they all looked different somehow. Harder, more dangerous. Crow emerged from what Maya assumed was a back room, carrying a battered coffee pot. The smell of brewing coffee should have been comforting, but instead it reminded her of her father's morning routine. Another life that felt impossibly distant now. "We need supplies," Dutch announced, his voice cutting through the cabin's stillness. "Food's running low." "I'll go," Sage offered, but Dutch shook his head. "Too risky. They're still looking." He paused, his gaze settling on Maya with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Besides, we have other priorities to discuss." Needle moved closer, settling beside Maya with predatory grace. "You know, honey, we've been thinking about your situation, about what's best for everyone involved." Maya's mouth went dry. "What do you mean?" "Well," Needle continued, her fingers absently playing with something in her pocket, something that clinked softly like metal against metal, "you can't stay here forever, and you can't exactly go home." "We want to help," Crow added, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "But help requires trust, complete trust." Maya nodded slowly, her mind racing. She needed to buy time, to figure out what they were really planning. "I understand. I'm grateful for everything you've done." "Are you?" Dutch's question hung in the air like a challenge. "Because trust is a two-way street, Maya. We've shared our home with you, our food, we've protected you. And in return," Sage said quietly, "we need to know we can count on your discretion." The word landed like a physical blow. Discretion about what? The mysterious sounds from the cellar, the hushed conversations, the way they all tensed whenever she asked too many questions. Maya forced another smile. "Of course. You've been nothing but kind to me." But even as she spoke, her eyes were cataloguing details she'd missed before. Crow's hands bore fresh scratches that hadn't been there yesterday. Dutch's jacket had what looked suspiciously like dark stains on the cuffs, and Needle kept touching that pocket, the metal objects inside clinking with each movement. "Good," Dutch said, but his tone suggested the conversation was far from over. "Because later today, we're going to show you something. Something that will make our arrangement permanent." Maya's blood turned to ice. "Arrangement?" "Don't look so worried," Needle laughed, but the sound was sharp and brittle. "We're family now, and family looks out for each other. Family keeps secrets." The implications crashed over Maya like a wave. Whatever these people were involved in, they planned to make her complicit. Once she'd seen their secret, once she'd been made part of it, there would be no going back, no leaving, no escape. She thought of her father, of his cruel smile as he'd driven away. Had he known? Had this been more than just punishment? Had it been a death sentence? "I should help with breakfast," Maya said, standing on unsteady legs. She needed space to think, to plan. But Sage caught her wrist, his grip firm. "Sit. Relax. You're our guest." The word guest sounded like prisoner the way he said it. Maya sank back down, trapped between their expectant faces and the growing certainty that whatever lay hidden in this cabin was connected to something far worse than simple theft or drug dealing. The way they watched her, the careful choreography of their movements, the underlying current of violence that seemed to pulse beneath their surface kindness, it all pointed to something darker. As Dutch moved toward the back room, Maya caught a glimpse of what lay beyond the doorway. Metal shelving lined the walls, and plastic sheeting covered objects she couldn't quite identify. But the smell that drifted out, chemical and sweet and wrong, made her stomach turn. Whatever they were planning to show her, She had until evening to figure out how to survive it. The journal's pages crackled like autumn leaves as Maya turned them, each entry revealing another piece of the puzzle that made her stomach twist tighter. Dr. Helena Marsh's handwriting grew increasingly erratic as the dates progressed, the neat scientific observations dissolving into desperate scrawls. Day 23, Subject 7 shows remarkable cellular regeneration. Wound healing accelerated by 300%. Must increase dosage. Day 31, Subjects becoming agitated. Memory issues persist. Consider sedation protocols. Day 45, they know something's wrong. Sarah keeps asking about her daughter. God help me, what have we done? Maya's hands trembled as she flipped through dozens of similar entries, each one painting a clearer picture of the horror that had unfolded in this cabin. The homeless people Dr. Marsh had recruited weren't just test subjects, they were victims of something far worse than she'd imagined. A loose photograph slipped from between the pages, landing face up on the floor. Maya gasped. It showed the same group now living in the cabin, but they looked different, younger, healthier. Sarah stood in the center, her arm around a teenage girl with dark hair and familiar eyes. That's my daughter, Emma. Maya spun around to find Sarah standing in the doorway, her weathered face etched with a sadness so profound it seemed to emanate from her very bones. Marcus hovered behind her, his expression unreadable in the lantern light. I was wondering when you'd find Helena's research, Sarah continued, stepping into the room. Been waiting 3 years for someone to piece it together. 3 years. Maya's voice came out as a whisper. How long have you all been here? Depends on what you mean by been, Marcus said grimly. Our bodies have been here for 5 years. Our minds, that's more complicated. Sarah moved to the desk and picked up the photograph with reverent care. We were all different people then. Helena promised us a medical trial that would change our lives. She wasn't lying about that part. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in as Maya struggled to process what she was hearing. The injections in your arms. Experimental serum, Sarah confirmed. Designed to enhance cellular regeneration, boost immune function, extend human lifespan. The fountain of youth in a syringe, she called it. But it worked, Maya said, confused. You said the wounds heal faster? Oh, it worked. Marcus's laugh held no humor. Better than Helena ever imagined. We don't just heal fast, Maya. We can't die. The words hit her like a physical blow. Maya stumbled backward until she hit the wall, the journal slipping from her numb fingers. That's impossible. Is it? Sarah's eyes held a haunted quality that made Maya's skin crawl. Tommy fell off that cliff 17 times before he stopped trying. I've held my breath underwater for 4 hours. Marcus walked into a forest fire last winter and came out the other side with 3rd-degree burns that healed by morning. We're not living, Marcus added quietly. We're just persisting, trapped in these bodies that won't let us go, watching the world change while we stay frozen in this nightmare. Maya's mind reeled. But Dr. Marsh, where is she? Sarah and Marcus exchanged a look that chilled Maya to her core. Helena couldn't handle what she'd created, Sarah said. The guilt ate her alive. She tried to develop a reversal serum, worked day and night for months, but the changes were too deep, too fundamental. We begged her to keep trying, but she put a gun to her head one morning and pulled the trigger. Marcus finished. Right there where you're standing. Maya jerked away from the wall as if it had burned her. Only problem was, she'd been testing the serum on herself too, Sarah continued. 3 hours later, she sat up, the bullet wound healed, her memory mostly gone. That's when we realized the true scope of what we were dealing with. Helena's buried out back, Marcus said. 6th time was the charm. Turns out complete decapitation does the trick. She begged us to do it. The room spun around Maya. She pressed her palms against her temples, trying to make sense of the impossible reality she'd stumbled into. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed us? Sarah asked gently. Would you have stayed? Maya thought about her father, about the cold hatred in his eyes when he'd abandoned her here. These people, these immortal, tragic souls, had shown her more kindness in 3 days than her own family had in years. The others, she whispered. Doc, Ben, Tommy, they all know? Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the cabin's windows like skeletal fingers seeking entry. Maya stared at the photograph in Sarah's hands, at the happiness frozen in time, and felt the weight of their secret settling over her like a burial shroud. Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the newspaper clipping Ghost had placed before her. The headline blazed across yellowed paper, "Local teen missing after family camping trip." But it was the photograph that made her blood turn to ice, a smiling girl with dark hair and bright eyes who looked exactly like Sarah. "This can't be right," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible in the cabin's oppressive silence. "Sarah's been here for months. She told me she ran away from foster care." Ghost's weathered face remained impassive. "Read the date." Maya's eyes found the small print at the top of the page. 3 years ago. Her stomach lurched. "I don't understand. Sarah looks exactly the same age now as she does in this picture." "That's because Sarah died 3 years ago in these very woods," Ghost said quietly. "Along with her family. They were camping about 2 miles north when a flash flood hit their campsite. Bodies were never recovered." The room began to spin. Maya gripped the edge of the wooden table, her knuckles white. "You're lying. I've talked to her. She's real. She helped me find food yesterday." Marcus stepped forward from the shadows, his usual smirk replaced by something that might have been sympathy. "We've all seen her, kid. We've all talked to her. Doesn't make it any less true." "But that's impossible," Maya said, though even as the words left her mouth, fragments of memory began clicking into place. Sarah never seemed to get cold, even when the rest of them were shivering. She never ate any of the food they scavenged, and now that Maya thought about it, she'd never seen Sarah sleep. Maya's legs gave out, and she sank onto one of the makeshift chairs. "Them? You mean there are others?" Ghost nodded grimly. "Sarah's just the most persistent. She appears to newcomers, gains their trust, makes them feel welcome." "Why?" Maya's voice cracked. "What does she want?" "Company," Marcus said with bitter certainty. "The dead get lonely too." Maya's mind reeled as she processed this information. Every interaction with Sarah replayed in her memory, taking on a sinister new meaning. The way Sarah had appeared so suddenly that first night, how she seemed to know exactly where to find shelter and supplies, the strange coldness that emanated from her whenever she got too close. "How long have you known?" Maya demanded, anger rising through her shock. "We figured it out after a few weeks," Ghost admitted. "But by then, you two had bonded. We hoped maybe this time would be different." Ezra looked up from his worn book, his eyes haunted. "Usually people who get too close to Sarah end up disappearing. We find their belongings, but never them." Maya's blood turned to ice water. "What happened to them?" The 3 men exchanged glances. It was Marcus who finally answered. "We think she takes them with her, to wherever she goes when she's not here." "And you just let me become friends with her?" Maya's voice rose to nearly a shout. "You let me trust her?" "We tried to warn you subtly," Ghost said defensively. "But you were so lost when you arrived. Sarah gave you hope. We didn't want to take that away unless we had to." Maya stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "Where is she now?" "Probably nearby," Ezra said. "She's never gone for long when there's someone new in the cabin." As if summoned by their conversation, the cabin door creaked open. Sarah stepped inside, her dark hair catching what little light filtered through the dirty windows. Her smile was as warm and genuine as always, but now Maya saw something else lurking behind those bright eyes, something hungry and desperate. "Hey, Maya," Sarah said cheerfully. "Want to take a walk with me? I found something really cool deeper in the woods." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to remain calm. Sarah couldn't know that they'd figured out her secret. "Sure," Maya said, hoping her voice sounded normal. "Just let me grab my jacket." Sarah's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too white, too sharp. Great. Don't worry about telling the others where we're going. They won't miss us. Behind Sarah, Maya caught Ghost's eye. He gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head, a warning. But what choice did she have? If she refused, Sarah might become suspicious, and if what the men said was true, that could be far more dangerous than playing along. Maya reached for her jacket with hands that barely shook. Whatever Sarah wanted to show her in the woods, she had a sinking feeling that if she went, she might never come back to tell anyone about it. Ready, Maya said, stepping toward the door and what might be her doom. That's Sarah, whispered a voice behind her. Maya spun around to find Marcus standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable in the dim light filtering through the boarded windows. You shouldn't be going through those things, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Who is she? Maya clutched the photograph tighter. And don't tell me it's nothing. I found news clippings too. Marcus's shoulders sagged as if he'd been carrying a weight for too long. He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. She was like you, young, alone, nowhere else to go. Maya's heart began to race. What happened to her? She found us about 2 years ago. We took her in, just like we did with you. Marcus sat heavily on the edge of the cot, suddenly looking much older than his years. She was running from something. Never told us what exactly, but we could see the fear in her eyes. Marcus nodded grimly. Sarah had been staying with us for about 3 months when the police started asking questions. Someone had reported her missing. We never found out who. Could have been family. Could have been whoever she was running from. Maya's mouth went dry. Did they find her? No. The single word hung in the air like a death sentence, because by then she was already gone. Gone where? Marcus was quiet for so long that Maya wondered if he'd heard her question. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. There are things about this place, about why we really stay here, that you don't understand yet. Then explain it to me. Maya's voice cracked with frustration. Everyone keeps talking in riddles. Tommy with his warnings, Elena acting like she's protecting some terrible secret, and now you telling me about a girl who just vanished. What aren't you telling me? Marcus stood abruptly and walked to the boarded window, peering through a gap in the wood. This cabin. It wasn't always abandoned. It used to be a research station. What kind of research? The kind that the government doesn't want people knowing about. Marcus turned back to face her. Psychological experiments, mind control techniques. They brought subjects here, people nobody would miss, homeless individuals, runaways, addicts. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. That's impossible. I wish it were. Marcus pulled something from his pocket, a small metal device that looked like a remote control. We found dozens of these hidden throughout the walls. Recording devices. The research might have officially ended decades ago, but the equipment is still active. The photograph slipped from Maya's numb fingers and fluttered to the floor. You're saying this place is bugged? More than that. The cabin sits on a network of underground tunnels that connect to a larger facility about a mile north. We've seen vehicles coming and going from there, always at night. Maya's mind reeled. If you know all this, why do you stay? Marcus's laugh was bitter. Because we tried to leave once. About 6 months after we found this place, we packed up and headed for the next county. We made it maybe 10 miles before we were encouraged to return. Encouraged how? Let's just say it became very clear that our presence here serves a purpose. We're not just hiding in an abandoned cabin, Maya. We're specimens in an ongoing experiment. The room seemed to spin around Maya as the implications sank in. Sarah, what really happened to her? She figured it out faster than the rest of us. Started asking too many questions, poking around places she shouldn't have. Marcus's voice became strained. One morning we woke up and she was gone. No note, no goodbye. Just vanished. Maybe she escaped. That's what we told ourselves at first. But then we found her belongings scattered in the woods. Clothes, the journal she never went anywhere without, even her shoes. No one leaves barefoot in the middle of winter. Maya sank onto the cot, her legs suddenly unable to support her. You think they killed her? I think Sarah learned something that made her a liability. Marcus knelt beside her and picked up the fallen photograph. The question is whether you're going to make the same mistake she did. Outside, the sound of footsteps on gravel made them both freeze. Marcus quickly shoved the recording device back in his pocket and motioned for Maya to stay quiet. "Someone's coming," he mouthed. Through the gap in the boards, Maya could see a black SUV pulling up to the cabin. Two figures in dark clothing stepped out, their faces hidden by the shadows of early evening. They'd found them. The basement felt smaller with each passing hour, the weight of Marcus's revelation pressing down on me like the earth above our heads. I couldn't stop thinking about the police officer upstairs, how his eyes had swept over everything, looking for signs of the very thing we were hiding. Me, "How long can we stay down here?" I whispered, though the officer had left hours ago. Marcus was sitting on an overturned crate, methodically cleaning dirt from under his fingernails. "As long as it takes. But Maya..." He looked up at me with those weathered eyes that seemed to see too much. "There's something else you need to know about your father." Elena shot him a warning look. "Marcus." "She deserves to know." He set down the small knife he'd been using. The officer today, he wasn't just asking about a runaway. He mentioned a reward. The soup can slipped in my hands, and I barely caught it before it spilled. "A reward?" $5,000 for information leading to your safe return. Marcus's voice was careful, measured. "That's not normal for a runaway case, Maya, not unless there's something else going on." I thought about my father's business associates, the men in expensive suits who sometimes came to our house for dinner. The way conversations stopped when I entered a room, the locked office door and the phone calls he took at strange hours. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe your father didn't abandon you out of cruelty. Maybe he was protecting you from something worse." The possibility hit me like a physical blow. All this time I'd been so angry, so hurt by what felt like the ultimate betrayal. But what if leaving me here wasn't punishment? What if it was the only safe place he could think of? "That doesn't make sense," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure I believed them. If he was protecting me, why not tell me? Why make it seem like... "Because the best way to sell a lie is to make everyone believe it," Tommy said from his corner. He'd been so quiet I'd almost forgotten he was there. "Even the person you're trying to protect." Elena was shaking her head. "We don't know any of this for certain. We're just guessing." But something was clicking into place in my mind, pieces of a puzzle I'd never realized I was solving. The way my father had been different these past few months. More distant, yes, but also more watchful. The new security system he'd installed, the way he'd started walking me to school himself instead of letting me take the bus. "There was a man," I said slowly. "About 2 months ago he came to our house. I was supposed to be asleep, but I heard shouting. My father was angry, angrier than I'd ever heard him. He kept saying, 'Not my family,' and 'Find another way.'" The adults exchanged glances, and I could see they were thinking the same thing I was. My father hadn't been the monster I'd thought he was. He'd been scared. "We need to get you out of here," Marcus said suddenly. "If there's a reward, it's only a matter of time before someone talks. This place isn't as secret as we'd like to think." Where would I go? The question came out smaller than I intended. "I have an idea," Elena said, "but you're not going to like it." Before she could explain, we heard footsteps upstairs, heavy boots, multiple sets of them. Marcus motioned for silence, and we all froze. The footsteps moved methodically through the cabin, and I could hear voices, though I couldn't make out the words. Then came the sound that made my blood turn to ice, the creak of the basement door opening. Light flooded down the stairs, bright and harsh after hours in the dim underground space. I pressed myself against the wall behind a stack of old furniture, my heart hammering so loud I was sure they'd hear it. "Clear down there?" a voice called from above. The beam of a flashlight swept across the basement floor. I held my breath, watching the circle of light pass inches from Tommy's hiding spot behind the water heater. "Looks empty," came the reply from whoever was at the bottom of the stairs. "Just storage junk." The light lingered for another few seconds, then disappeared. The footsteps retreated, and eventually we heard car doors slamming and engines starting. We waited in the darkness for what felt like hours before Marcus finally spoke. "We leave tonight," he said. "All of us. This place is blown." I thought about my father, somewhere out there, possibly fighting battles I knew nothing about. I thought about the reward money and how it meant people were looking for me who shouldn't find me. Most of all, I thought about trust, and how sometimes the cruelest seeming actions might actually be love wearing a disguise. The morning sun filtered through the cabin's grimy windows, casting long shadows across the floor where Maya spent another sleepless night. Her father's ultimatum echoed in her mind like a broken record: find the evidence or lose everything. But which evidence? The drugs hidden in the walls, or whatever Marcus was desperately trying to conceal? She watched Marcus through the doorway as he paced the main room, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice carried just enough for her to catch fragments. "No, we can't move it yet. She's getting too close. Give me 48 hours. Ice formed in her stomach. They were talking about her. "Morning, sunshine." Sarah appeared beside her, offering a cup of instant coffee that smelled like burnt rubber. "You look like hell. Thanks for the pep talk." Maya accepted the cup, using it to warm her trembling hands. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Shoot. How long have you really known Marcus?" Sarah's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a micro-expression that would have been invisible if Maya hadn't been watching so carefully. "I told you, about 6 months. Why?" "Just wondering." Maya took a sip of the awful coffee. "It's just that you two seem to have this understanding. Like you've been through something together." "We have. Living on the streets bonds people fast." Sarah's tone was casual, but her eyes had gone guarded. "Look, I know Marcus can seem intense, but he's kept us all alive out here. Tommy was half dead from infection when Marcus found him. Eli was so strung out he couldn't remember his own name. This place, this group, it saved us. What about you? What were you running from?" Sarah was quiet for so long that Maya thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My ex-husband. He put me in the hospital 3 times before I finally got smart and disappeared. The shelters weren't safe. He knew how to find me there. But Marcus offered something different. True invisibility." The pain in Sarah's voice was genuine, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling there was more to the story. Everyone here had layers of truth, like sediment deposits in rock. You had to dig deep to find what was really underneath. Tommy burst through the front door, his face flushed with excitement and fear. "There's cars coming up the mountain road, black SUVs." Marcus snapped his phone shut. "How many?" 2, maybe 3. "Still about 10 minutes out." The cabin erupted into controlled chaos. Marcus started barking orders while Eli and Sarah began grabbing bags that Maya hadn't even noticed were pre-packed and ready. This wasn't their first evacuation. "Maya, get your things," Marcus commanded. But she stood frozen, watching the practiced efficiency of their escape routine. "This isn't random, is it?" she said. "You've been expecting this." Marcus paused in stuffing papers into a backpack. "We're always expecting this. That's how we survive." "No." Maya's voice grew stronger. "This is specific. Those cars, you know who's in them." "Maya, we don't have time for—" "My father sent them." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Eli stopped moving, his perpetually nervous energy suddenly still. "What did you just say?" Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. "My father, Richard Hawthorne. He sent me here, and now he's coming to collect." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to continue. "The question is, what does he really want?" "Because it's not me." Sarah dropped her bag. "Hawthorne? As in Hawthorne Industries? You know him?" "Jesus Christ, Maya." Marcus ran his hands through his hair. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I haven't done anything. I'm just trying to understand why my father would abandon me with a group of people who are clearly not who they claim to be." Tommy appeared at the window. "They're closer. Maybe 5 minutes now." Marcus made a decision. "Everyone out the back. Now, Maya, I'm not going anywhere until someone tells me the truth." "The truth?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The truth is that your father destroyed my family. The truth is that this cabin sits on land that should have been protected wetlands, but somehow got rezoned for development after a very generous donation to the right officials. The truth is that when my sister tried to investigate the environmental impact, she ended up dead in a car accident that was anything but accidental." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. "That's impossible. My father builds hospitals, schools." "Your father builds whatever makes him money, and he destroys anyone who gets in his way." Marcus shouldered his pack. "The question now is whether you're here as his spy or his sacrifice." The sound of car engines grew louder, echoing off the mountain walls like thunder. Maya realized with crystalline clarity that her next choice would determine not just her fate, but the fate of everyone in this cabin. And she still had no idea who to trust. The basement felt like a tomb as Maya pressed herself against the cold stone wall, her heart hammering so hard she was sure it would give her away. Above, footsteps creaked across the cabin floor, heavy, deliberate, searching. Her father's voice carried down through the floorboards, muffled but unmistakably angry. "I know she's here somewhere. The car's still outside." Marcus crouched beside her, his weathered face etched with concern. In the dim light filtering through a grimy window well, she could see Sage huddled with the twins near the far wall, their eyes wide with terror. The basement that had once felt like a sanctuary now trapped them like rats. "There's another way out," Marcus whispered, barely audible. He pointed toward what looked like a solid wall. "Hidden door. Leads to the old mine shaft." Maya's stomach dropped. The mine shaft where they'd hidden the evidence of what really happened to those missing hikers, where the bones lay scattered in the darkness, picked clean by time and creatures she didn't want to imagine. Above them, another voice joined her father's, deeper, official-sounding. A police officer, maybe. Her father had brought backup. "Sir, you said your daughter was kidnapped. We'll need to search the premises thoroughly." Maya's mind raced. If the police searched the basement, they'd find the hidden entrance. If they found the mine shaft, they'd discover everything. The truth about the hikers, about what this group had really been hiding, about the desperate measures they'd taken to survive. But if they stayed here, her father would find her. And after what she'd learned about his connection to the missing people, about the payments he'd been receiving to keep quiet about the trail that led to this cabin, she wasn't sure which fate would be worse. Marcus was already moving toward the hidden door, his movements urgent but silent. He pressed against a section of the wall, and it swung inward on silent hinges, revealing a yawning black mouth that seemed to swallow their flashlight's weak beam. The footsteps above grew more systematic, room by room. They were running out of time. "Aya, you need to know something," Marcus whispered as they gathered at the threshold. "About your father, about why he really brought you here. He didn't abandon you as punishment. He knows about us, about what we've done. He's been covering for us, taking money to keep the search parties away from this area." Marcus's voice was heavy with guilt, but something changed. Someone started asking too many questions. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Her father hadn't dumped her here in anger. He'd delivered her here. But why? "He made a deal," Sage whispered, her voice shaking. "We heard him on the phone yesterday. He promised to clean up the loose ends in exchange for enough money to disappear." Maya felt the world tilt sideways. "Loose ends?" Marcus met her eyes, his expression grim. "Us, and now you, because you know too much." The footsteps overhead stopped directly above them. Through the floorboards, her father's voice was clearer now. "Officer, I think I hear something in the basement." They had seconds. "There's something else," she said suddenly, remembering the documents she'd found in her father's study before this nightmare began. "I saw papers, contracts. He's not just covering for you, he's working for the people who own this land, the ones who want it cleared of witnesses." Marcus's face went pale. "What kind of contracts?" "Development deals, mining rights. This whole area's supposed to be cleared for a new operation." Maya's voice was urgent as the footsteps moved toward the basement door. "They need everyone gone." The homeless camps, the hikers, anyone who might interfere. The basement door creaked open above them. "Maya?" Her father's voice called down, sickeningly sweet. "Are you down there, sweetheart? Daddy's here to take you home." But Maya knew better now. Home was a lie, just like everything else he'd ever told her. The only truth was here, in this dark basement with these broken people who'd become more of a family than he'd ever been. She stepped toward the mine shaft, toward the darkness that might kill them all but was still better than the false light her father offered. Together, she whispered to the others. Marcus nodded, understanding flooding his eyes. Whatever came next, they'd face it as they'd faced everything else, as a family forged in desperation and bound by secrets that could destroy them all. Behind them, footsteps descended the basement stairs, and her father's voice grew closer, more insistent, more dangerous with each word. The weight of Marcus's confession hung in the air like smoke from the dying fire. Sarah stared at him, processing the impossible truth that her father, the man who had abandoned her here as punishment, was somehow connected to the very people he'd left her with. The irony felt like a knife twisting in her chest. "You're telling me my father killed someone here," she said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "And you've all been, what, hiding it, living with it?" Elena shifted uncomfortably on her makeshift bed, her fever having broken sometime during the night. "It's more complicated than that, honey." "How?" Sarah's voice cracked. "How is murder complicated?" Marcus ran his weathered hands through his grey hair. "Because your father didn't mean to kill him, and because the man he killed was going to hurt you." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "What are you talking about?" "Your father brought you here once before," Marcus continued, his eyes distant with memory. "You were maybe 8 years old. He was drunk, angry about something, probably your mother refusing to give him money. He dumped you here just like he did a few days ago, told you to wait while he went to handle some business." Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her. She had no memory of this, but something deep in her mind stirred, a vague recollection of cold woods and strange faces. "There was a man staying with us then," Elena said quietly. "Cal Morrison. We thought he was just another lost soul like the rest of us, but he took an interest in you that wasn't right." Ben, who had been silent until now, spoke up from the corner. "He waited until Marcus and I went to look for food. Then he tried to—" He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "Your father came back earlier than expected," Marcus said. "Found Cal with you in the back room. You were crying, and your shirt was torn." Sarah felt sick. The memory was there now, buried but real. Hands that felt wrong, a voice telling her to be quiet, the taste of fear sharp and metallic in her mouth. "Your father went crazy," Elena said. "I've never seen rage like that. He grabbed the first thing he could find, that old axe we used for firewood, and he just snapped." "Cal fought back," Marcus added. "They crashed through the furniture, knocked over the oil lamp. For a minute we thought the whole place was going to burn down. But your father was like a man possessed. He kept hitting until Cal stopped moving." Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled her knees to her chest. "And then what?" "Your father looked at what he'd done, looked at you and just broke down," Elena said. "Started crying like a child, kept saying he was sorry, that he never meant for any of it to happen, that he was a terrible father who couldn't even protect his own daughter." "We buried Cal in the woods," Ben said matter-of-factly. "Your father helped dig the grave. Then he picked you up, carried you to his truck and drove away. We never saw either of you again until a few days ago." The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of secrets finally spoken. Sarah felt like she was drowning in the implications. Everything she thought she knew about her father, about herself, about this place, had been turned upside down. "That's why you recognized me," she said finally. "That's why you took me in so easily." Marcus nodded. "You look just like you did then, only taller. Same eyes, same stubborn set to your jaw when you're scared but trying not to show it." "And the bottles?" Sarah asked, thinking of her father's drinking, the way it had gotten worse over the years. The way he's been since then? Guilt's a heavy burden, Elena said softly. Some people carry it better than others. Sarah thought about her father's increasingly erratic behavior, the way he'd look at her sometimes like he was seeing a ghost, the violent mood swings that had grown worse as she'd gotten older. It all made a terrible kind of sense now. So, when he brought me here this time, she began. He was coming full circle, Marcus said. Maybe hoping we'd tell you the truth. Maybe hoping we'd help him figure out how to live with what he'd done. Or maybe, Ben said grimly, he was hoping we'd finish what Cal started. Elena shot him a sharp look. Don't. The question that burned in her mind was simple but terrifying. If her father was capable of murder, and if these people had helped him cover it up, what else were they capable of? And what exactly did they want from her now? The basement door slammed shut above them with a finality that made Maya's stomach drop. In the sudden darkness, she could hear Marcus's labored breathing beside her and the distant sound of heavy footsteps moving around upstairs. Her father had found them. There's got to be another way out, Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. Maya felt him moving in the darkness, hands searching along the concrete walls. She pulled out her phone, using its weak flashlight to illuminate their prison. The basement was smaller than she'd expected, with rough stone walls that looked decades old. Wooden shelves lined one side, filled with dusty canning jars and forgotten storage boxes. But what caught her attention was the far corner, where the beam of light revealed something that shouldn't have been there. Fresh scratches in the wall, as if someone had been clawing at the stone. Marcus, she breathed, moving toward the marks. As she got closer, she realized they weren't random scratches. They were letters, carved deep into the wall with desperate precision. Her light traced the words, "Sarah was here. He killed the others." Marcus appeared beside her, reading over her shoulder. "Sarah," he repeated. "That's the girl Doc mentioned, the one who disappeared." Maya's hands trembled as she held the phone higher, revealing more scratched messages covering the wall. Dates going back months, names she didn't recognize, and at the bottom, fresher than the rest, "Maya, your father knows about the cabin. GET out." "She was trying to warn me," Maya whispered. "But how did she know my name?" Before Marcus could answer, they heard the basement door creak open. Heavy footsteps on wooden stairs. Maya quickly shut off her phone, plunging them back into darkness. They pressed themselves against the far wall, hearts pounding in unison. "I know you're down there, Maya." Her father's voice echoed in the small space, calm and controlled as always. "And I know you've seen things you shouldn't have seen." A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, sweeping back and forth across the basement floor. Maya held her breath, grateful for the shelving that provided some cover. "You always were too curious for your own good," he continued, his footsteps reaching the bottom of the stairs. "Just like your mother. She couldn't leave well enough alone either." Maya's blood ran cold. Her mother had died in a car accident when Maya was 12. At least, that's what she'd always been told. "The homeless camps make perfect hunting grounds," her father said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "People no one will miss, no one will look for. At least, that's what I thought until you started playing hero." The flashlight beam swung closer to their hiding spot. Maya could see her father's legs now, moving slowly through the basement like a predator stalking prey. "The cabin was supposed to be temporary," he continued. "Just until I could clean up the mess you made. But you couldn't stay away, could you? Had to go back and play house with your new friends." Marcus's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing tight. She could feel him tensing, preparing to move. "Sarah tried to run too," her father said, and Maya heard him stop walking. "Smart girl. Almost made it to the police. Almost." The flashlight beam suddenly swung toward their corner. Maya pressed herself flatter against the wall, but she knew it was only a matter of seconds before he found them. The funny thing about trust, Maya, is how easily it can be broken. Those people you think care about you, they'd sell you out in a heartbeat if it meant saving themselves, just like Sarah's friends did. That's when Maya understood. The homeless camp. Her father hadn't just stumbled upon it, He'd been hunting there, using people's desperation against them, and somehow Sarah had discovered the truth. The flashlight beam landed directly on them. There you are. Maya could see her father clearly now, and what terrified her most wasn't the cold smile on his face, but how normal he looked. Just a man in a business suit, like he'd come straight from another one of his meetings. "Run," Marcus whispered urgently. They bolted in opposite directions. Maya heard her father curse as his flashlight beam swung wildly, trying to track both of them. She crashed into the shelving, sending jars clattering to the floor. Glass shattered around her feet as she scrambled toward the stairs. Behind her, she heard Marcus cry out. Then a heavy thud. "He's alive," her father said calmly. "For now. But that depends entirely on your cooperation, Maya. Come here. Now." Maya's mind raced. Sarah's carved messages, her mother's suspicious death, the missing people from the camps, everything led back to her father, to the man she'd spent her whole life trying to please. She took a step toward the stairs, then another. But instead of surrender, she felt something else rising in her chest. Rage. The basement door creaked open behind them as Maya pressed herself against the cold stone wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. Footsteps echoed down the wooden stairs, heavy, deliberate, familiar. Her father's voice drifted through the darkness, low and conversational, as if he were discussing the weather. "I know you're down here, Maya, along with your new friends." His shoes scraped against the concrete floor. "Did you really think I wouldn't find you?" Beside her, Sam's breathing had become shallow and rapid. In the dim light filtering from above, Maya could see his face had gone pale, his eyes wide with something beyond fear, recognition. Elena gripped Maya's arm so tightly it hurt, her fingernails digging into skin. "You see," her father continued, his voice echoing off the walls, "I've been watching this place for quite some time. Waiting for the right moment. A pause. Waiting for the right people." Maya's mind raced. This wasn't coincidence. Her father dumping her here, finding this specific group, this cabin with its horrific basement, none of it was random. The realization hit her like ice water. She'd been delivered here like a package. "Mr. Chen," Sam's voice cracked as he stepped forward slightly. "Please, we haven't done anything wrong." Her father's laugh was soft, almost gentle. "Haven't you? Then what's that smell, Sam? What are those stains on the floor?" His footsteps moved closer. "What happened to the others who came before Maya?" Others. The word hung in the air like smoke. Maya felt something break open inside her chest, not just fear now, but understanding. The missing persons reports Elena had mentioned, the way the group had been so quick to accept her, so eager to keep her close. The locked basement door. "He's lying," Elena whispered, but her voice carried no conviction. "Am I?" Maya's father emerged from the shadows, and she could see him clearly now. He looked exactly as he always did, neat grey suit, perfectly trimmed beard, the calm expression he wore during his most vicious moments. "Tell her about the first one, Marcus. Tell her about the girl who looked so much like Maya." Marcus stepped protectively in front of Maya, but she could see his shoulders shaking. "That's not... We didn't... 17 years old, brown hair, father issues." Her father's voice was clinical now, detached. Just like Maya, just like all of them. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity, the way they'd insisted she stay. The careful questions about her family, her life. Sam's expertise with locks and security. Elena's knowledge of police procedures. Marcus's strength, his ability to move heavy things. Maya. Her father's attention fixed on her, and she felt that familiar chill of being truly seen by him. "These people aren't your saviors. They're collectors. And you're not the first girl I've brought them." "No," the word escaped her lips before she could stop it. But even as she denied it, she was remembering the way they'd looked at her that first night, not with surprise, but with something like satisfaction. The clothes that had fit her perfectly, someone else's clothes, the basement door that was always locked. "The arrangement is quite simple," her father continued. "I provide them with what they need. and they provide me with peace of mind. No more dealing with ungrateful daughters, no more questions about where they've gone." Sam's face had crumpled completely now. "Maya, please, it's not what he's making it sound like. We would never hurt you. We care about you." "Care?" Her father's eyebrows raised. "Is that what you called it with Jessica? With Amber? With the one before that whose name I've forgotten?" Maya's legs felt weak. The kindness she'd experienced here, the feeling of belonging, it had all been real to her, but what had it been to them? A performance? A practiced routine they'd perfected over months, years? "Tell me," she said, her voice barely audible. "Tell me the truth." The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. Elena's grip on her arm loosened. Marcus looked at the floor. Sam opened his mouth, then closed it again. "We never meant for it to go this far," Elena finally whispered. "The first time, it was an accident. She tried to leave and we couldn't let her, and then—" Her voice broke. "But you're different, Maya. We really do care about you." "Different how?" Maya's father asked pleasantly. "Because she's lasted longer. Because she's been more compliant." The word compliant hit Maya like a physical blow. All her life, she'd been trained to be compliant, to accept whatever treatment was handed to her. And she'd walked straight from one trap into another, grateful for the cage because it was prettier than the last one. But now, standing in this basement that smelled of fear and worse things, listening to the two sides of her nightmare discuss her fate, Maya felt something new rising in her chest. Not compliance, not gratitude, rage. The silence stretched between Maya and Marcus like a taut wire ready to snap. Behind them, the others had gone unnaturally quiet, the weight of revealed truths settling over the cabin like dust from a collapsed ceiling. Maya's hand still trembled around the blood-stained journal, its pages now seeming to burn against her fingertips. "You don't understand," Marcus said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "None of you understand what really happened that night." "Then, explain it." The words came out harder than Maya intended, but she was tired of half-truths and buried secrets. "Explain why Detective Harrison wrote that you confessed. Explain why there's blood on these pages." "The detective didn't write those notes," Marcus began, each word seeming to cost him. "I did. I found his journal after I found his body." Maya's breath caught. His body? Detective Harrison was investigating the Riverside murders. He'd been getting close, too close to something bigger than just a serial killer picking off runaways. Marcus's hands clenched and unclenched in his lap. He'd figured out that someone was hunting us specifically. Not random homeless kids, us. The ones who'd seen something we shouldn't have. The cabin felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in as if the building itself was holding its breath. Sarah moved closer to Maya, her face pale in the lamplight. "What did you see?" Maya asked. "A transaction. Money changing hands behind the old warehouse district. We were just looking for somewhere to sleep, but instead we witnessed a drug deal involving someone who definitely shouldn't have been there." Marcus met Maya's eyes. "Your father." The words hit Maya like ice water. Her father, cruel, controlling, but surely not a criminal. Yet even as denial rose in her throat, pieces began clicking into place. His unexplained absences, the way he'd moved them from town to town whenever things got too settled. His paranoid warnings about staying away from certain people and places. "You're lying," she whispered, but the conviction was already draining from her voice. "I wish I was." We tried to forget what we'd seen, tried to pretend it never happened, but then kids started disappearing. Kids who'd been in that area, who might have seen what we saw. Detective Harrison was the only cop who seemed to actually care about finding them. But then Harrison turned up dead, Finn added grimly from his post by the window. "Made to look like an accident, but we knew better. We found his body before anyone else did, found his notes about the investigation. Marcus grabbed what he could before we ran." Maya's world tilted sideways. Everything she thought she knew was crumbling, reshaping itself into something darker and more complex. Her father hadn't just abandoned her as punishment for her defiance. He'd placed her directly in the path of the only witnesses to his crimes. "He knows you're here," she said, the realization hitting like a physical blow. "He knows exactly where you are." Marcus nodded slowly. "We figured that out when you showed up. It wasn't coincidence that brought you to us, Maya. Your father dumped you here knowing we'd take you in, knowing we'd trust you because you were just another lost kid like us. But what does he want? Why not just—" Maya couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the obvious conclusion. "Because he needs to know what evidence we have, what Detective Harrison might have shared with others before he died, and because making us disappear all at once would raise too many questions. Better to use you to get close, to find out what we know." Sarah's hand found Maya's shoulder. "The question is, what are you going to do now that you know the truth?" Maya looked around at their faces. These people who'd welcomed her, protected her, shared their meager resources and precious trust. People her father had used her to betray, whether she'd known it or not. The journal felt heavier in her hands, its pages containing evidence that could either save them all or seal their doom. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the cabin's old windows. In the distance, Maya thought she heard the sound of an engine, growing closer through the darkness. Her blood turned to ice as headlights swept across the window, casting long shadows across the cabin walls. Marcus was already moving, grabbing the journal from her hands. "Everyone out. Now, back exit." But Maya knew with sick certainty that it was already too late. Her father had found them, and this time there would be nowhere left to run. The metallic click of a gun being cocked echoed through the cabin's suffocating silence. Maya's breath caught as she stared down the barrel, her father's cold eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight behind her. The homeless group she'd grown to trust stood frozen, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and resignation she'd never seen before. "Well, well," her father's voice dripped with mock surprise. "My ungrateful daughter has found herself quite the collection of misfits." His gaze swept over Thomas, Elena, and the others. "Though I suspect they're not quite what they appear to be, are they?" Thomas stepped forward slowly, his hands raised. "Sir, there's no need for violence. Maya doesn't know anything." "Doesn't know anything?" Her father's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. "About the Meridian facility? About what you people really are?" His eyes narrowed. "About the little experiment that went so terribly wrong?" Maya's world tilted. "What is he talking about?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "Maya, we wanted to tell you." "Tell her what?" her father interrupted, pressing the gun closer to Maya's temple. "That you're all escaped test subjects from a government black site? That you've been hiding here for months while the authorities hunt you down?" His smile was cruel. "That her dear old dad has been working with them all along?" The words hit Maya like physical blows. She stared at the people she'd come to see as family, searching their faces for denial, for anything that would prove her father was lying. Instead, she found only guilt and sorrow. "The cabin," she whispered, understanding flooding through her. "The security cameras, the medical supplies, the way you all seem to know things you shouldn't." Her voice broke. "You're all part of some experiment?" Thomas nodded reluctantly. "Cognitive enhancement trials. They were trying to create enhanced intelligence, improved memory, faster processing speeds. But the side effects—" He gestured helplessly. "We started remembering things that weren't ours, seeing connections that shouldn't exist. Some of us began exhibiting precognitive abilities. That's how you knew I was coming," Maya breathed. "How you prepared for me." "Elena saw it 3 days before you arrived." Marcus spoke for the first time since her father's entrance. "She saw a scared girl who would change everything for us." Maya's father tightened his grip on the weapon. "How touching. But the reunion ends now. You've all caused enough trouble, and my daughter has seen too much." "I left her here because I knew exactly what you were," he snarled. "This whole thing was a test, to see if you'd break your precious hiding, reveal yourselves for a helpless child. And you did, beautifully. The pieces clicked together in Maya's enhanced understanding, another side effect she was only now recognizing. Her father's sudden cruelty, the convenient timing, the way he'd found them so easily. "You've been watching, waiting." "For months," he confirmed. "Meridian needed their assets back, and I needed to prove my loyalty after your mother's unfortunate curiosity about my work." His expression hardened. "She got too close to the truth. Just like you." The implications struck Maya like ice water. "Mom didn't leave. Your mother was very disappointed in some of the classified materials she discovered in my office. We couldn't let that information reach the wrong people." Thomas moved imperceptibly closer, his enhanced reflexes calculating angles and timing. "Let Maya go. She's your daughter. She stopped being my daughter the moment she chose you freaks over her family." The gun wavered slightly as emotion crept into his voice. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me? The position I've lost, the reputation." Maya felt something building inside her, a clarity and focus she'd never experienced before. The time spent with the group, breathing whatever lingered in the cabin's air, had changed her too. She could see the micro-expressions on her father's face, calculate the exact moment when his attention would shift. He did, and in that split second of confusion at the change in her demeanor, Maya ducked low and rolled sideways. Thomas lunged forward, Elena moved to flank, and Marcus dove for the weapon. The gun fired, the sound deafening in the confined space. Someone screamed. Wood splintered as the bullet buried itself in the cabin wall. In the chaos that followed, Maya saw her father's face transform from confident control to desperate panic as he realized he was outmatched by people whose minds worked faster than he could follow. But she also saw something else in his eyes, a communication device in his ear, blinking red. "They're coming," she whispered, understanding flooding through her enhanced consciousness. "This was never about capturing you. It was about keeping you here long enough." Outside, the distant sound of helicopters began to grow louder. The morning light filtered through the cabin's broken windows, casting long shadows across the floor, where Maya sat with the ledger open in her lap. The weight of everything she'd discovered pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. Around her, the group stirred awake, their faces etched with the same tension that had kept them all from truly resting. "We can't stay here any longer," Marcus said, his voice hoarse from the night's revelations. "If they find us with that evidence?" "They won't find us," Maya said quietly, her fingers tracing the damning entries in her father's handwriting. Each page revealed another layer of corruption, another life destroyed by his greed. The homeless shelter funds, the construction permits, the bribes. It was all here, documented in his meticulous script. Elena looked up from where she'd been tending to old Pete's wounded arm. "Maya, honey, you don't understand what kind of people we're dealing with. Your father, he's not just cruel, he's dangerous." "I know exactly what kind of person he is," Maya replied, her voice harder than she'd ever heard it. "He left me here to die, didn't he? He knew about the dangers, knew about your situation, and he still abandoned me here as punishment." The silence that followed was broken only by the wind whistling through the cabin's gaps. Sarah, who had been unusually quiet since the previous night's confrontation, finally spoke. "There's something else you need to know," she said, her eyes fixed on the floor. "About why we really came here. About why your father wanted you gone." Maya's blood chilled. "What do you mean?" Sarah pulled a crumpled newspaper clipping from her jacket pocket. The headline made Maya's stomach drop. "Local teen witnesses father's business meeting." The accompanying photo showed Maya in the background of what she'd thought was just another boring dinner party. "You saw something you weren't supposed to see," Marcus explained gently. 3 weeks ago, at your house, the man in the expensive suit who visited your father, that was Vincent Corelli. He's been laundering money through your father's construction projects for years." Maya's mind raced back to that evening. She'd come downstairs for water and had glimpsed her father handing over an envelope to a stranger. She'd thought nothing of it at the time, but now, "He saw me," she whispered. The man looked right at me. "And he told your father to handle the problem," Elena said, her voice thick with emotion. "That's when your father started planning to bring you here. He thought if something happened to you in these woods, with us as witnesses to your accident, no one would ever question it." The ledger slipped from Maya's numb fingers. Her own father had planned her murder. The cruelty, the abandonment, it had all been calculated to silence her permanently. "But we won't let that happen," Sarah said fiercely. "That's why we saved you from the bear trap. That's why we've been protecting you. We know what it's like to be thrown away by people who should care about us." Maya stood slowly, her legs shaking. Through the window she could see movement in the distant trees. Dark figures were making their way up the mountain path. "They're coming," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. The group sprang into action with practiced efficiency. Pete began gathering their few possessions while Elena stuffed the ledger into a waterproof bag. Marcus checked the back exit, his face grim. "The old mine shaft," he said. "It's our only chance." As they prepared to flee, Maya felt something shift inside her. The scared, abandoned girl who had arrived here days ago was gone. In her place stood someone harder, someone who had looked into the darkest corners of human nature and survived. "Wait," she said, stopping them all. "I have a better idea." She pulled out her phone, surprised to see a single bar of signal. Her fingers moved quickly as she typed out a message to her best friend, attaching photos of the ledger pages she'd taken during the night. "What are you doing?" Sarah asked. "Insurance," Maya replied. "If something happens to us, if they catch us, the truth still gets out. My friend will send these to every news outlet in the state." The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. Through the trees, Maya could see her father's familiar silhouette alongside several men she didn't recognize. "Now we run," she said. As they slipped out the back of the cabin and into the dense forest, Maya felt a strange sense of peace. She was no longer running from her father's cruelty. She was running toward justice. The homeless strangers who had become her unlikely family moved silently beside her, their loyalty unwavering despite the danger she'd brought into their lives. Behind them, angry voices echoed through the cabin as their pursuers discovered the empty rooms. But Maya and her chosen family were already gone, disappearing into the wilderness like ghosts, carrying with them the evidence that would finally bring down a monster.